Welcome to Cadence Design Systems Fidelity Tutorial Tuesday, where we show you how to use a feature or demonstrate a technique in just a few minutes. Today, let's expand on the meshing of ZR effects and look at some advanced options that can be very useful. This is part 3 of our 3-part series on ZR effects. If you haven't seen the first 2 videos on how to import and mesh ZR effects, you can find the links to those videos in the description. Today we will start directly in the mesh context, having imported the channel curves, blade geometry, and ZR effect curves. The first advanced option we will look at is in the ZR Techno Effect properties. So I will click on my ZR Techno Effect in the tree, and opening the Advanced Default Mesh property menu, you can see that there are a series of inputs here. And the first 3 represents the expansion ratio on different areas. So for example, the first one is a general expansion ratio. The other 2 are in the boundary layers and along the boundaries. So a simple way to refine or de-refine the default mesh in the ZR effect is to change those values. So for example, if I wanted to refine overall the mesh in the ZR effect, I could reduce that general expansion ratio value from 3 to 1.4. And then if I click on default mesh again, you will see that it has refined the mesh. Let's go even more refine by decreasing it to 1.2 and clicking on default mesh again. So you will see that now I have an extremely fine mesh. Like, let's go back to 3. And now what we can do is we can reduce the expansion ratio along the boundaries, which is this third input. So if I change this from 1.8 to, let's say, 1.4 and click on default mesh again, you will see that along the big boundaries, like for example, those 2 here, the mesh is now finer. So those default mesh properties inputs are good for changing the mesh overall in the ZR effect. I'm gonna put this back to 1.8. Another input here, the last one, this clustering relaxation angle, is by default 5 degrees. But in some cases, if you have some long, narrow areas, you can see that this clustering relaxation is actually leading to some skewed cells. So if you prefer to reduce the relaxation and have more perpendicular grid lines, you can decrease that number. So for example, if I switch from 5 to 0 and click on default mesh again, you will see that in this area we now have grid lines that are much more perpendicular to the side of the ZR effects. Now we also have more clustering, and in that case we may want to increase the optimization steps and optimize the mesh to get rid of that clustering in that way. The second advanced option we will look at is the manual modification of the ZR effect. So in the ZR effect properties, there is this edit mesh button. So we're going to click on this, and this will give us access to each of the blocks. So we can see the block outlines that have been automatically created by when clicking on automatic blocking. And now what we can do is we can change the number of points on each segment of those blocks. We can change the distribution, and we can also delete block and create new ones. So how would we do that? So for example, let's change the number of points. So I will select one of the segments, for example, this one. So you can see that the block it relates to becomes red, and then the segment that I have selected is yellow, highlighted in yellow. And I can go to the segment control here and open this little menu and open number of points. And you can see that right now I have 17 points on this segment. if I increase that number to, for example, 33 and click on apply, you can see that I have about doubled the number of points. And you can also see that it propagates to neighboring blocks because this propagate radio button was activated. Now let's change the distribution. So right now we have an automatic distribution with an end spacing, which is the first cell size that I have applied, 1 to the -5. But we could switch that to, for example, at both ends. And if I wanted to increase the size at the start of that segment, so I can triple it, for example, and click on apply, you can see that this is way too big, but you can see the effect of that new distribution. I can reduce it by a factor of 10, and now it's much more homogeneous. You can also delete and recreate blocks. So let's take a slightly different block. So I'm going to click on this one. I'm going to click again on the same segments because I want to select the other block. So right there, now it's highlighted in red. That's the block that I wanted. So by just clicking on the segment multiple times, it will go through the different blocks that contain the segment I'm clicking on. And I'm going to delete this block. So this is the third button here, delete selected block. There we go. And I will recreate the block. So now you can also see that it says unmapped edges too. You can highlight them by clicking on the little bulb button here. And you can see that those segments are connected to no other segments and they are not mapped onto a meridional curve. That's why they're unmapped. I will click on the first button to create a face or a new block. I will left click anywhere to get the block set up, and then I can click on the little vertices and map them onto a new vertices. So that's a click and drag, left click and drag to map them onto the different curves and the other vertices. Now here we're missing one vertex that I need to map onto this other one. So I will create a new vertex, insert vertex, which is the second button here. I can then left click to set it up there. And then like the other one, I can take it and move it to the other vertex. So now you can see that there is no more unmapped edges. All the edges have been connected. And if I exit this tool and click on default mesh, the mesh will be reset using the new block that I created. Finally, a third advanced option is to control the number of points in the ZR effect in the theta direction. So to do that, in the 3D properties of the ZR effect, you do have the option theta number of points, which is currently set to 0, which means that we are letting Autogrid decide what is the optimal number of theta point according to the measure. But you can control this. So for example, if I were to change the number of theta point, and then we're gonna regenerate the mesh, now we can see that we have a finer mesh in the theta direction. We have more points in this direction. The very last thing I will mention is about the connection between the ZR effect and the main channel. So sometimes we do not want the ZR effect to be perfectly matching with the main channel, so not to have a one-to-one connection, but we always want to have a similar grid density on both sides, on the ZR effect side and on the main channel. And if we just generate the ZR effect without a matching connection, it can happen that the grid density is very different. So for example, in this case, we have about 5 cells on one side, on the side of the ZR effect, and only 1 on the main channel side. So that is not enough to pass the information from one side to the other. So without making the connection perfectly matching, what we can do is create additional z-constant line on both vertex of the connection. So clicking on the mesh setup for Turbo Machine, we can add a meridional z-constant line and click where the ZR effect connects. So now I have 4 different z-constant lines. So now what we can do is select the z-constant line and increase the number of streamwise points. So that will increase the number of points between the 2 z-constant line. So let's go ahead and increase it a little bit and regenerate the 3D mesh. What you can see now is that I have forced more points between the 2 z-constant line, and now the distribution is more appropriate. There's a more similar grid density on both sides, and the information will be passed more accurately from one side to another. If you like this video, be sure to click the thumbs up button or subscribe to our channel for more upcoming videos like this. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, drop us a line down below or connect with us via LinkedIn, which is linked in the description. Thank you all and have a great Tuesday.